I hope everyone is doing good and staying safe during this global pandemic. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Annalisa, and I wanted to share something that has recently impacted my life, and that's veganism.
And I'm Wilson, Annalisa's boyfriend, and we'll be talking about a couple of things that are very relevant to today's society, such as climate change, COVID-19, health, and sustainability. Enjoy.
If you don't know what veganism is, it's essentially the avoidance of all animal products and byproducts. So meat, milk, eggs, cheese, yogurt, and things that contain those ingredients. Also food that you don't even really think about, like chocolate, gummy candy, gummy vitamins, and more.
With everything going on in our world today, climate change, depletion of our ozone, increasing greenhouse gases, it's like Mother Nature is literally screaming at us to stop what we're doing.
And of course, the more recent COVID-19 pandemic that, according to the CDC, comes from the methods that we kill, contain, and eat animals. It's pretty much a part of a family of illnesses that are common in people and many different species of animals, including camels, cattle, cats, and bats, all of which are eaten by people across Asia, and then spread between people, such as with the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus.
This is a viral respiratory illness that's new to humans. It was first documented in Saudi Arabia in 2012 and has pretty much spread to every continent, including the United States. Most people infected with this disease develop severe respiratory illness, including fever, a cough, and shortness of breath, in which many of them had died. SARS was initially reported in Asia in 2003. It spread to more than 24 countries in North America, South America, Europe, and Asia before it was finally contained. And just like clockwork, we're back here again with SARS 2.0.
The SARS-2 virus is a beta coronavirus, and like the Middle Eastern and severe acute respiratory syndrome viruses, it originates from bats. The sequences from U.S. patients are similar to the one that China initially posted, suggesting a likely single recent emergence from an animal source.
Early on, many of the patients at the node in Wuhan, Hubei province, China had something to do with it, whether it was consumption or distribution of the large seafood and live animal market, suggesting animal-to-person spread. Later, a growing number of patients reportedly did not have any contact with animals or seafood of any kind, which only meant one thing: person-to-person spread. This type of dispersal was then reported outside Hubei and in countries outside China, including the U.S. Some popular destinations have suffered major community spread with COVID-19.
Community spread means some people have been infected and it's not known how or where they became exposed. So with this, we can see that animals have a larger effect on our lives than we thought, especially if we're going to continue to consume them. Climate change, as we all know, whether you believe it or not, is real. According to NASA, the greenhouse effect is what happens when sunlight and heat enters the Earth's atmosphere, and due largely to water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, some of it remains trapped in the atmosphere. The result is a warmer planet, and this is where we start to hear the terms global warming and climate change. But keep in mind, the greenhouse effect is necessary. It's how our planet stays warm, especially on the side of the world that is facing away from the sun at the time where it's nighttime, but too much causes the planet to heat up beyond its natural equilibrium. Water vapor is a natural recurring element that can cause greenhouse gases. So is carbon dioxide. It can come from simple respiration or volcano eruptions. But with accelerated human actions such as deforestation, which is pretty much like taking our storage of carbon dioxide and just throwing it up into the air, and land use changes, so having to, again, knock down trees, and expand our land usage for 1, a growing population, and 2, making land space for cattle or livestock, which includes cows, chickens, pigs, goats, and other animals owned by farmers.
The next molecule that has a profound impact on our planet is methane. 28 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at warming the Earth, and while carbon dioxide is much more abundant, the chemical composition of methane makes it much more effective at trapping heat. Methane gases are released by decomposition of waste in landfills, agriculture, and manure management associated with livestock. The methane that is released from cow manure is massive. Manure can run off into local water sources and streams, contaminating the water supply, and according to the National Geographic, there are 1.4 billion cattle in the world. And that number is growing as demand for beef and dairy increases. Together with other grazing animals, they contribute about 40% of the annual methane atmospheric consumption. This heat leads to melting of polar ice caps, glaciers, and with that, the release of prehistoric methane gases trapped in the ice that keeps our planet from heating too much. Also, something that I found incredibly interesting is that it's not a pattern that's due to increasing solar activity, as some claim. This graph from NASA clearly shows that solar activity has remained constant relative to Earth's temperature levels. This means that the sun is not having major fluxes in radiant energy per unit area that are considered intense enough to affect the temperature of the planet, so it's definitely a separate factor, a man-made factor.
All I can say is the universe is in good shape. It's Earth that has all the problems.
This one is very important because this is what will affect our future generations when the population is at its threshold and we're straining the planet for its resources. Wealthy countries consume out of proportion to their populations. A great analogy is that we live our lives as if our savings account balance were steady income. According to the World Watch Institute, the Earth has 1.9 hectares of land per person for growing food and textiles for clothing, supplying wood, and absorbing waste. Yet the average American uses about 9.7 hectares. So simply put, our Earth can only realistically support 1/5 of the present population, about 1.5 billion people at an American standard of living. Thus forth, our choices have a major impact on our environment. Think about all the land, water, and other resources needed to take care of billions of livestock and cattle. On globalagriculture.org, it's found by the United Nations Environment Program that the production of meat, milk, and eggs leads to an enormous loss of calories grown in fields because cereals and oil seeds have to be cultivated to feed animals, and the calories that are lost by feeding cereal and grain to the animals instead of using them directly as human food could theoretically be used to feed an extra 3.5 billion people. According to the World Hunger Site, Africa is the continent with the highest number of people who were affected by severe food insecurity in 2016, or undernourishment, at 27.4%. Yet, due primarily to its larger population size, Asia has the highest total number of undernourished individuals, 520 million, versus Africa's 243 million. So it's clear to see that eating meat does absolutely nothing to help the environment. Now that we have the topic of our entire planet's degradation out of the way, let's talk about the nutritional benefit of a plant-based lifestyle. First off, you have the most obvious of complaints among meat eaters, which is the buildup of low-density lipoproteins, or LDL cholesterol, which according to Healthline is basically the bad cholesterol that can result in plaque accumulation in your arteries and leads to the highest cause of death in the US, ischemic heart disease, in accordance with the World Health Organization. WebMD also states that red meat is high in saturated fats, which drastically increases LDL cholesterol and also releases carcinogens when cooked, which are substances and exposures that can lead to cancer, as stated by the American Cancer Society.
For those of you that claim to only eat white meat, research from Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute suggests that white meat, such as poultry, is just as harmful to your blood cholesterol levels as red meat. Researchers recruited more than 100 healthy adults who were split into two groups. The first group ate a diet high in saturated fat, while the second followed a diet low in saturated fats. The participants then followed 3 different diets: a red meat diet, a white meat diet, and a non-meat protein diet, for 4 weeks each. Beef was the primary source of food in the red meat diet and chicken in the white meat diet. The researchers collected blood samples from the participants at the start and at the end of each diet to measure total cholesterol along with low-density lipoprotein. The research team thought they'd find that red meat was more harmful than white meat. Surprisingly, they discovered that red meat and white meat had the same impact on cholesterol levels, including LDL, when they had the same saturated fat levels. Participants' LDL levels were of course lower after they'd consumed plant-based proteins.
Now, if you're totally down for heart disease and clogged arteries that can lead to death by heart attack or stroke, then don't listen to us. But if not, and you'd like to hear more, then keep watching. Finally, morality. It's probably the primary reason for the majority of our actions as a human race. This argument lives on such a spectrum and is very contentious. From Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, to Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump, and the meat industry, we all have our own reasons for acting certain ways, and that's totally fine. But we can all agree that history has been defined mainly by religion. The KKK getting their reasoning from the Bible just as Martin Luther King did. It shows that it's all about interpretation, and that's what makes this part of morality so difficult.
But what we'd like to ask of you is simply to think to yourself what part of killing an animal sounds just to you. The caging, the mass overcrowding in warehouses, the terrible health conditions the animals live in. Maybe not. Probably the throat slitting. That sounds very justified. Or it could be terrible treatment they receive throughout their entire lives. Why is it that animals are put on a lower level than humans? Is it because they can't speak and voice their opinions?
Well, my friend's uncle has Down syndrome and has trouble vocalizing his thoughts, opinions, wants, and needs. So maybe we should just kill him. No, we shouldn't. So it couldn't be that. Maybe it's the fact that they don't speak our language, because I think there's more than 6,000 languages on this planet. So no, it's not that. Is it because they look different? Because if so, then you're really starting to enter slave ideology. And we don't even want to get started on that. And for those who proclaim this only happens on industrial farms, well, according to the USDA, 99% of all farmed animals in the US live on factory farms, and they practice concentrated animal feeding operations with terrible practices. Egg-laying hens' beaks are sliced or burnt off, and they're crammed in tiny wire cages with other birds without the space to turn around or spread their wings. Many die as a result of their confinement, while others suffer broken bones, open cuts and sores, as well as other injuries. Once a hen has stopped laying eggs after a year or two, she's removed. So it couldn't possibly be that they're treated humanely, because they're not. So what's your next excuse? Is it because you need to get your nutrients, or you're afraid of protein deficiency? Because nutrients can be supplemented so easily, and in agreement with VRG.org, the Vegetarian Resource Group, sufficient amounts of protein can be found in tofu, hemp seeds, chickpeas, lentils, nutritional yeast, oats, and nuts.
All of these foods can easily and cheaply be bought at the grocery store.
And of course, for those out there who are trying to go vegan but can't give up the taste of meat, brands like Beyond Meat, Morningstar, Light Life, Boca, Corn, Gardein, and Dr. Prager have probably hundreds of options to choose from so that you can get the taste of meat without actually eating meat.
If we're being truthful, those products are probably where the lifestyle can become sort of costly, but that's only if you're buying a whole bunch of them. If you include a few of those brands in with a primary vegetable and fruit diet, the grocery store trip will pretty much be the same as any other time.
Eating a plant-based diet is not expensive. You just have to get creative with your recipes, and if you're not a cook, don't worry. There's thousands of books, websites, and videos that show you great recipes. Again, it's just like a meat-based diet when it comes to resources and recipe variability.
Overall, our main concern is that the way we're currently living isn't doing any good for any species or planet. We understand completely that there are extraneous situations, like your parents or your environment, that prohibit in some way eating a plant-based diet, but we're asking those who can to at least think about it. Is it really worth putting your personal preference over someone else's life? Whether it's for environmental reasons, health reasons, or moral reasons, it's easy to see that eating meat does more harm than good, while a vegan lifestyle helps everyone.